Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of our creating a mask tutorial. So in this video, let's go ahead and see where we left off in the previous video. So we created this low poly and the high poly version of our mask. If I go to the geometry, I can dial this back up, and if I turn my poly frame, you can see that I have both, right? I have the high res and kind of the low res version of my mask, right? So what is the process of taking these both of these versions and bring into Substance Painter for some baking and just creating some basic PBR textures. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make sure that I have both, right? I need both low poly and high poly versions, and I currently have one, and it is controlled by the subdiv slider, right? So what I would like to do is I'm going to make a duplicate, and I'm going to hide one of them. It doesn't really matter which one. Let's say I'll hide the bottom one. I'm gonna go back into the geometry, and I'm just gonna say delete higher. And the reason I'm doing that is because now I'm just left with the low poly version. All right, very cool. So next, let's jump into our Z plugin and go into something called UV Master, right? And I can have the symmetry turned on because this is perfectly symmetrical, right? So that's great. And let's just simply do unwrap. As soon as I press unwrap, you can see that I have a little flatten button up here. If I click on it, it's going to show me what my current UVs for this mesh look like, right? And you can see that the head is still here. We can always just simply hide it. And another thing we can do is we can say auto groups. And the reason you want to do auto groups is because now we can individually move these pieces around, right? So how does that work? For example, if I grab my move, and let's do something like Control Shift and click. We'll select this one. Let's move this maybe over here, and we can make it a little bit larger because we do have all this empty space in our UV sheet that's completely not being used, right? So there's no reason for that. Let's just take let's maybe make a better use of this space, right? So I'm gonna do the same thing with this one. I'll do Control Shift and click on this guy, scale him up. If you want to change the pivot, you can always just simply click on this button, and that's gonna change the pivot. I do have my active symmetry on. Maybe I don't want that. Actually, I'm going to turn that off by pressing X. And now I can just maybe scale these. I can rotate them as I wish, and just literally just design my own custom UV sheet that that makes sense, right? I'm going to grab these guys here, and let me just move them out of the way for a minute. They are not as important. They're just little kind of strings. Again, I can change my pivot, and if I want to change the rotation of the pivot, I can unlock and do something like that. That's fine. Let's just make this a little bit larger. The reason I'm making this larger is because I know that we are going to be stamping the back detail here in Substance Painter as a graphic. So let's just make this nice and maybe large. We'll do something like this. I think the back is probably just as important as the front. Let's just maybe move these around just a little more. All right, very nice. To get rid of the masking, just control and drag, and look at this. We have beautiful UVs generated pretty much in a matter of seconds, and that is pretty awesome, right? All right, very cool. Let's go ahead and say unflatten, and now we need to simply export this low poly version as an FBX file into Substance Painter. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to come up here and do export. In here, let's just select our FBX format, and I'm going to call this mask underscore low, and just say save. These should be fine. I'm going to say OK. All right, the only other thing that we obviously need is the high res version. So the low is done. Let's go ahead and hide it. Let's go ahead and go into the high res one. And for the high res, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to delete. Let's go to geometry. Let's turn this all the way up, and I'm going to delete lower, right? All I need is the high one. And this is all I need. And it's currently 1.1 million points. We can always do a decimation on this if we want to bring it down. Let's go ahead and see if that's necessary. I'm going to go to decimation master. Let's do pre-process current. All right, and then once it finishes, instead of leaving it at 20%, I'm fine with even just going 50%. And let's go ahead and do decimate current. All right, you can see that it took us down by 50%. So now we are at 580,000 points. If I turn on my polyframe, I can see that it's still super dense. It should be great for carrying the detail over to Substance Painter, right? So same thing, I'm gonna come up here and do export. And instead of low, let's just simply call this one underscore high and say save and say okay. Next, let's go ahead and jump into Substance Painter. All right, so here I am in Adobe Substance Painter. I'm gonna say File, New. I'm gonna set my document resolution to 2K, and let's just simply say Select. I'm gonna navigate to my mask low.fbx and say Open, and let's just say OK. All right, and here's our mask. We can see what that looks like. If I wanted to preview my UVs and make sure everything looks correct, I can go to this button right here, and I can say 2D and 3D, and you can see what your UVs look like. This looks pretty great. Let's jump back into just the 3D only. And the other thing I can do is if I wanted to turn on the back, right now you can see that it's not doing the double-sided. Let's just change the shader so we can see the double-sided angle of this by going into shader settings. Let's click on this button right here. Let's select PBR metal roughness with alpha test and just click on that. And that's going to give us the back as well, right? So we can see both sides. Very cool. Maybe that's going to be a little bit easier for us to see. Now let's bring in the high-res version so we can bake all of that detail from the high-res mask, which is really just the dots, right? So I'm going to go to my bake mesh. Let's click on bake mesh. Let's set this to 2K once again, and let's go ahead and click on this button right here. I'm going to find my high one and say open. Once it comes in, we can review and see if there's any issues. Any red is usually what you want to pay attention to, but the red in this case is just all the stuff inside the mask, right? So it's not going to be seen. All of this looks pretty good, so I don't need to adjust anything here, right? A lot of times when you see the red, you just have to adjust the distance to make sure Substance Painter can bake it correctly. And the anti-aliasing, let's just switch this to something pretty low, like 4 is fine. And I'm going to leave all of these alone just as is and just simply say bake. All right, once it finishes, let's just say return to painting mode and take a look. And now what we are seeing is the low res version of our mask with the high res detail baked on top, right? And this looks pretty good. I think now let's pull up our reference. And here's my reference, and what I'm seeing here is just kind of a solid black color as far as the front goes. So let's just delete the default material, and let's just simply add a add fill layer. And in here, I'm just gonna go to sample, and let me just simply sample the kind of the dark, it's kind of like a black bluish grayish color. So I'm just gonna sample that, and you can see that automatically that gets painted. And now we can, of course, adjust if we wanted to add any kind of metallic values or the roughness values. Maybe we want it super shiny or not shiny at all. It seems like by default at 0.5, this is about right. So that is how easy we were able to take care of that, right? Because there's nothing really going on here. The only other thing that we might be interested in is let's just figure out how we can stamp some of this detail back here, right? So how do we do that? Now, the best thing you can do if you're doing something like this is definitely get a nice version, kind of a high-res version image of this. I don't currently have it. I'm just going to use this just as a test anyway. So I'm going to let me take a quick screenshot of this. All right, and now since I have the screenshot, what I should do is let me open this up in Photoshop and just make a perfect circle out of this. So you can use Photoshop for this, or you can use an ocean of other programs, doesn't really matter, but all essentially I need is just this round piece right here. So let me just simply grab this by making a circle. I can move this around if I wanted to. That's pretty cool. Let's do Control C, and let's just simply create a new document, and it's going to be a perfect square, right? 263. Let's just make this just a little bit larger. Let me just do something like 300 by 300, and I'm going to say okay. I'm gonna do Control V. It's gonna put it in the middle. And for what I'm doing, this should be pretty perfect. If I wanted to change any of this, I can of course adjust maybe the curves if I want to see it a little bit better. We could do that. We can also, of course, maybe sharpen it. Let's go to Filter, do something like the sharpen, and see if that's helpful. I also want to make sure it's transparent, so I'm going to delete the bottom layer. And now I just created kind of this square stamp, right? So let me just simply export this out as a PNG. And the reason I want to do PNG is because I do want to maintain the transparency mode, right? So I do have transparent turned on, so that's important, right? Make sure that's on. And let's just do an export. I'll call it stamp, that's fine. Let's jump back into Substance Painter. And in here, let's do File, Import. And let's go ahead and do Add Resource. Let's find our stamp.png and say Open. And in here, I'm just gonna simply select this as a texture, that's fine. Doesn't really matter, I'm gonna say Import. And now you can see that it was imported into my library. And what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna create a new layer. And I'm just gonna drag this image right into my color. I'm gonna press Alt and click to just activate the color only and deselect everything else. Now what I can do is I can come up here and make my brush just a little bit larger. Let's pull up our reference once again. All right, here it is. And what I need to do is let's just figure out what is the size of our stamp. Now if I press stamp, you can see what that looks like. One of the things maybe I don't want is this alpha brush. So I'm gonna turn that off actually. This is gonna give me a sharp stamp just of the PNG image, right? So I could do that, and you can see that now maybe I don't have any of that fade that was there, and maybe I could make this a little bit smaller. Let's change our size a little bit, and let's just do something like this. If I wanted to make sure that it's in the middle, I can always turn this on, and that's gonna give me a precise location of the middle. And I'm just gonna go ahead and stamp this in. It's pretty perfect. Let's go ahead and turn that off. All right, the cool thing about this also is that if you look at your actual textures, right, you can see that the stamp is right there, which means you can always open this image straight into Photoshop, and at any point without Substance Painter, just change the textures as you wish, right? It's just easy enough, but this is gonna be a nice way to kind of figure out where things are and, you know, see if that's something you like. How do we create this nice little pattern that I'm seeing right here on the back? For that, let's just simply create another layer, a fill layer. Let's activate our height by pressing Alt. And in height, let's go ahead and come here and let's just decide if we want to find a pattern that's maybe similar. I'm gonna say pattern. And let's just see if we can just grab something that kind of resembles what I'm seeing here. And I'm not planning on making it precise or spending a lot of time, but just so it's kind of close enough, right? So I'm liking either this one or maybe this one right here, like the fence one, or even this should work as well. Just figure out what you like. Or of course you can import your own image as well. Just for the sake of speed, I'll just go with this here, that's fine. Once I activate it, you can see what it's doing, right? It's creating a pattern over the entire model. I don't want that, so I'm gonna right click and say black mask, add a black mask. I'm gonna select my polygon fill here. I'm gonna activate my UV chunk fill and just simply click on this back portion only, and that's going to only apply the pattern to the back of the model. Let's go back into this design, and we can decide if we like the tiling, maybe we want it a little bit smaller. We can also decide if we want to, this one seems to be on the angle, right? We can always rotate this, maybe, you know, do something like this. So it's kind of similar, maybe change the scale once again. Now, it's also kind of overlapping my middle stamp here. How do I clean this up, right? What I could do is I can go into my mask, grab my eraser, and in here, if I make my brush kind of large, I can just simply erase the part of the mask. And remember, I can always turn off the alpha. And now let's come back here. Let's do something like a circle. I need this circle here. Let's just activate that as our alpha. we'll kind of match the size to be about the same. And let's just simply stamp it right in the middle to get rid of any of this detail, right? Just kind of only leaving our front design without the pattern, right? If we wanted to change the depth of this, we can always go to height, and in here we can always adjust this little thing here, and that's going to adjust kind of the intensity of our design. Maybe I want to have it just a little bit less visible, right? Let's come up here and let's check this out. We can change the lights if we wanted to. We can change the shadows, right? We can turn the shadows on because this is a PBR texture. That's going to be kind of in a real 3D environment. We can see what that looks like. We can also, let's play a little, right? We can go to post here. We can activate our vignette, and we can just do something pretty as far as the background goes. All right, very cool. So what else can we do? Another thing we should do is maybe let's go ahead and add another layer on top. Let's right click. Let's add a filter, and let's just click on this bake light. We can of course change the position of the bake light. Maybe we want the bake light coming from the top instead of the side. So I can always change that. And in the bakelite settings, let's go ahead and change this, the base color from normal to, let's change it to multiply. We can see what that looks like. All right, to export this out, let's just do File, Export. And in here, we can leave it on PNG. The size, maybe we want to do 2K. For padding, I usually, it's up to you. I like to leave it on background just so I can see where the textures end. And all of this is fine. We can come here. We can see what the maps are that are given to us. It's going to be the base color. We have height, normal. If we do export, we can then click on this button to preview everything. We can see what that looks like. This is our texture, right? This is going to be our height. We have our normal map. The one thing that I'm missing here is the ambient occlusion, right? How do I get my ambient occlusion in here? Let's just change our template for 1 minute from PBR metallic roughness to, I'm gonna do mesh maps. And now if I come down here and look at my list, I should be able to see ambient occlusion, and that's right there. If I go back into the settings, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say uncheck all, and let's just find the one that is gonna be this one, ambient occlusion. I know it's hard to see, but if you go back into the list, you can see that's the only one that's is being checked. So now if I say export and go back into my output directory, you can see that I have successfully exported out my ambient occlusion map as well, right? So these right here will be my PBR texture maps for this 3D asset. I can do save, and there you have it. So this is a step-by-step process of exporting it out of zBrush as a low and high poly, baking it and creating PBR textures. All right, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys in our next one.